Now that we have worked out with the leasing related assumptions, let's start our focus on the next set, which is the construction related calculations. So, the first phase of the project, which is the build phase or the construction phase. So, what I would be looking at is here I would like to handle the construction related costs. So we'll try to put up all the construction related calculations and all here. But yes, before we look into it, couple of things that we have to make sure which is consistent across all the sheets is this particular framework for ourselves, the year as well as the phase, right? Because the construction related calculations will be applicable wherever the year is a construction year, whereas the operations related calculations will be applicable wherever the year is a operations year. So but what we will do is we'll try to maintain consistency across, so as not to create any kind of a differentiation in the process. So what we will do initially to start with is to use the same thing across. We will not use any kind of copy paste. Rather, we would be simply going with a simple logic saying if this particular value is equal to blank, leave it as blank. Otherwise, copy this value. So with this exercise, what will happen is the same thing I'll drag to the second, and as we have done it even in our earlier thing, I'll do this dragging exercise up to the AZ column to maintain that level of consistency. We have to visualize the problem right in the beginning itself. So what we are able to see here is, yes, this is talking about only up to 33 years. The first 2 years are the construction period. So whatever the construction related costs that are going to come up, it would be in this particular area. Fair enough. Now I need to know what are the costs that are incurred in each of the cases. If we go here, whatever are the costs that are applicable for the first 2 years of the project. So these are some of the costs that are applicable for the first 2 years of the project. So either the simple way is all these things again could have been modeled as separate projects altogether, right? So what generally we do is work out all this construction cost related stuff elsewhere, right? We can work out all the construction cost related stuff elsewhere, and we can bring out one entry here saying total base construction costs. Why are we talking about total base construction costs? On the top of it, a lot of other costs will be incurred for us. What are those other costs? Yes, I am talking about pre-operative cost, which is a percentage of the total cost. So I'll call pre-operative costs. It's basically like during the construction period, we incur a lot of operating expenses. Like in this first 2 years of construction period here, probably we might have incurred on the employees, we might have incurred on the office space before our operations really commence, because in this case the operations are really commencing only from year 3. So until those operations are commenced, we are incurring some kind of a cost which could be for employees or for some promotions, whatever the operations costs which we are incurring before the start of the operations phase. That is what we are calling as pre-operations cost. And whatever these kind of cost, even that cost is built into the construction cost only. That is what we call it as pre-operative cost capitalized. Capitalized means we are treating it as a part of the construction cost itself. So even that cost we have to handle. Then we are talking about project development cost. Even that is incurred as a cost in the first 2 years of the project. So we are only listing out what all costs could be possible, right? We are even talking about the stamp duties. These are some of the costs that are applicable during the construction phase. Okay, we are getting into stamp duties. We have some upfront premium. The typical usage of an upfront premium could be either I may have to pay to my consultant or some advisor, and that's an upfront cost for advising on this entire process or for various reasons. So there are probably in some government projects, the government expects that the developer pays an upfront premium to the government to take up this particular exercise. So that is also a cost that is inbuilt into the process. Then we have the registration charges. Again, there could be different rules associated with the registration. So let's look at the registration charges. Even that is applicable for the first 2 years of the project. Then insurance and financing costs. So we are talking about all these costs in the first 2 years of the project. Insurance charges and even the finance costs. So all these are the various costs that are incurred during the construction phase. And this does not include what we call as interest during the construction period. We'll handle it slightly separately. The finance costs are basically the administrative thing with respect to the administration, documentation kind of thing with respect to the loan that is going to be taken. So it does not really include the interest. The typical finance charge is nothing but the interest on the loan that I am not including as a part of these costs. Now, the one thing which I have to be comfortable with is all these costs, they are spread over the period of 2 years, because we are talking about the construction period to be 2 years, and the construction costs, everything need to be spread over the 2-year period. And whichever are the costs which are upfront or which are the ones which are one time, those costs probably I may not allocate across the years, whereas whatever is relating to the base construction or operations, those kind of things probably I may allot in a proportionate basis in terms of the completion of the work itself, right? So let's look at from that standpoint. So let's try to fill in each of these aspects. Now, the total base construction cost. What is the total cost? Okay, in this process, if at all I think that some intermediate calculation kind of thing is required. See, basically, if I am talking about the total construction costs here, Logically speaking, as on the current prices, these are my total construction costs. Some around 77.07 crores. But this has to be spread over a 2-year period. That's one point. And as it is highlighted in this case, that the inflation in the second year, the inflation index is 5%. Means whenever I have to look at the cost for the second year, it would be better that I increment it by 5%. Whatever are the costs incurred in year 2, it would be better that I increment that by 5% rather than taking it as it is. So in those kind of cases, wherever I think the value requires a kind of upgradation, either I can maintain an intermediate location where those calculations are done, or if at all I have to do that here itself, what I could have done is the same. I would do the summation of, let's look at it step by step. I would do the summation of these 4, which are my construction costs, in as of today. That construction cost, I multiply it by the proportion of the work completion. And anyhow, in year 2, the remaining proportion will come out. So I will multiply this by the proportion of work completion, and for the first year there is no inflation, and from the second year onwards, and second year there is inflation, third year there is inflation of 5% applied 2 times. So the inflation factor, the number of times the inflation factor is getting applied is 1 less than the number of years. Right? For the first year, I don't need to consider the impact of inflation. For the second year, I multiply it by inflation factor once. Third year, I multiply it by the inflation factor 2 times, and so on. So from that dimension, all I can do is I can put a formula directly saying 1 plus whatever is the inflation index. So I'm putting $1 here, to the power the year number minus 1. If I'm taking this entire calculation, what is coming out is the first year's base cost is coming out to be this number. Take it on to the second, third, fourth, and so on. What I'm getting is the numbers are coming out to be zeros, but the better way would have been, if this is equal to C, then do the calculation, but if this is equal to O, leave it as blank rather than showing it as 0. So I could have written a small rule on the top of it saying, if this is equal to C, means the construction phase, do this entire job, otherwise leave it as blank. So these are some of the things we have to be quite comfortable with while working out with our financial models. I mean, even if you don't use them, it's not so penalizing, but our model looks ugly with so many zeros and so many all those things, which are not really necessary. So we have to follow these kind of practices rather than anything else into the building of the robust financial model. Similarly, when we are talking about the pre-operative cost, we are saying, what is the pre-operative cost that we have identified here? Percentage of the total cost, 10% of the total cost. So all I could have taken is, this is the total cost. So this cost multiplied by 10%. Straightforward calculation. But here also, just imagine I am dragging it like this. This is giving me a value error. The other way this could have been handled is the same logic which we have written above. If this is equal to C, as long as that is C only, do this, don't do it otherwise. Means it's only the cost is applicable to the construction phase only, otherwise you leave it as blank. Now what happens when I am trying to drag it, make sure that everything is dragged only up to AZ to maintain that consistency. Though it's a pain, you have to maintain this consistency so that the the extensibility, the scalability, all of them are much more comfortable. Similarly, when we are talking about the project development costs, we are talking about the 2% of the escalated construction cost. What is that escalated construction cost? Probably even after the operations cost is incurred, I am talking about the 2% of that, which means I am doing the summation of these two. Remember that you should not multiply directly by a number called 2%. Better you pick it from this location. So this is what is your project development cost. The same logic, before I drag it, I will simply say if this is equal to C, retain this calculation, otherwise leave it as blank. So this is what is coming out, right? Probably you do it up to AZ, then okay, here also we are getting something like this. Then the next thing that is coming out is the stamp duties. The stamp duties, it is highlighted in the case also that it is 0.8% of the lease rental or 5% of the market value of the land, whichever is higher. Whichever is higher. So, if these kind of assumptions changes or if these kind of formulas changes, even those formulas you should be able to incorporate into the model. But once you incorporate all those things, the financial statements which you create out of them, they should be quite robust. Any changes you make here, the financial statements need to be updated dynamically, and that is what will be the benefit of your model. Now, the stamp duties, as we are talking about, the stamp duty is 0.8% of the total lease rentals or 5% of the market value, whichever is higher. And remember, stamp duties are always one time, that too in the first year itself. So if at all I am going with that kind of a logic, if it is applicable only to the first year, all I can do is either I can do it here itself, or I say if this is equal to 1, which means it's a first year. I do that entire process. I'll take the maximum of, what are the things? 0.8% of the lease rentals. What are so from the leasing sheet I can get that. I'll take the summation of, or probably we already have done total annual rental, right? So I don't need the summation again. I'll directly take the 0.8% of the total annual lease rental, or I will take 5%. This is 5% times the market value of the land. What is the market value? 1.5 crores per acre multiplied by 55 acres. That is the market value of the land. So I am taking those two things, the maximum of those two things, in case it's a first year. Otherwise, I'm just ending up with a blank, saying that this is applicable only to the first year. This cost is applicable only to the first year. I'm dragging it again up to AZ. So even this exercise is, even this cost has been modeled. The same logic I can go with upfront premium. Upfront premium also is applicable to the first year alone. So I will put a logic saying if this is equal to 1, just pick up the upfront premium. No much of calculation because it's a straightforward cost. 15 crores is the upfront premium that has been highlighted. Otherwise, I am taking it as blank, a straightforward calculation. So upfront premium coming out in this way, right? It should give the flexibility that any change that comes up, at least to a good extent, those changes are captured as a part of our model. Now the next thing I am going to handle is the registration charges. Even they are one time, which is 0.5% of the average lease rental. So even this, it's a one time thing. So all I could say is, if this is applicable only for the first year, all I can go with is, if that is equal to 1, I'll go with 0.5% times the average lease rental. Average annual lease rental is what I have already considered. So that would be the value. Otherwise, I'm taking it as blank. So this is what is the registration charges working out to. Fair enough. So even that expense is figured into our model. This is the registration charges. Then we are talking about insurance charge. How do I compute the insurance charge? Insurance is applicable on the cost, right? And so it is applicable for both the years. One thing, insurance is applicable for both the years. So 1% of the construction cost for the first year. For the first year, whatever is the construction cost, because insurance is something that we are taking it on a yearly basis. Or again, I have to make my own assumption. Yeah, assuming that the insurance is something which I am taking on a yearly basis, here I can make that assumption. I am taking the insurance on a yearly basis. So whatever is the construction cost for that particular year, I am taking insurance by paying a premium of 1% on the top of that construction cost. So in the first year, I'll take only to the extent of whatever the cost for that year. Whereas in the second year onwards, I have to club the previous year also and then take the cost. So that's where what I would be doing is, I will check out if this is equal to C, right? If that period, if it is still the construction period, what I would be doing is I will add up all the, I will take the summation from here to later, wherein I will freeze the first dollar. I will take this total cost from B4 to B4, whatever is the cost. So for the next year, it becomes B4 to C4. So whatever is the total cost, as long as it is a construction period, whatever is the total cost, I multiply it with the construction costs. Otherwise, I'll leave it as blank. So for this, what happens is, for the first year, the insurance charge will come out to be something like this. For the second year, okay, I have to, what is happening here? I am talking about C2 equal to C, sum of, okay, instead of here, instead of freezing 4, probably it's better that I freeze B. I'm freezing B instead of 4, so that even if I drag, it becomes B4 to C4. Yes, this is happening to be my insurance charge for the second year. And for the third year onwards, when I'm dragging, because it's an operations year. Anyhow, the insurance is applicable to the operations period also, but here we are modeling only the construction cost. So I am focusing only during the construction period itself. And then comes the financing cost, and the way we are talking about the financing cost is 1.5% of the project cost before IDC, which means all these costs plus whatever is the financing cost. Let me assume that the financing cost is X, and in the next year the financing cost is Y. So now that the way we are working it out is, when I add up all these things, that will be my total project cost before IDC, right? So what does that mean? When I am looking at all these costs, right, whatever is the number, when I look at all these costs plus X, what is the summation of all these costs? 54.03. Just giving you an example. 54.03 is the cost plus some X, which is the finance charges. This is equal to the total project cost before IDC. So what is happening here? If I want to find out the X, or probably the X we are talking about as 1.5% of the total project cost before IDC. So what is happening here? If I do basic mathematics, it is saying 54.03 is 98.5% of the total project cost before the IDC. So from here I can derive my total project cost as 54.03 divided by 98.5%. This will give me the total project cost, and 1.5% of the total project cost will give me my financing cost for that period. So this is the logic which we would typically be used to find out what are the finance costs before the IDC. So 54.03 by 98.5% will become my total financing costs. right? Sorry, my total project cost before IDC. So for this, I will take one piece called total project cost before IDC. IDC is a very important aspect, as I have been talking about, interest during the construction period. So again, this also is applicable only for the construction period. If this is equal to C, we have to be slightly careful when we are doing our model. Otherwise, we keep getting n number of errors once we start playing around with it, and it does not look good as far as the presentation is concerned. So that's where in the beginning itself I have mentioned that this kind of financial model creation is more of an Excel spreadsheet game rather than anything much with respect to the finance, because it has to be more and more dynamic. It has to accommodate as many scenarios as possible. For that, you have to think to whatever depth possible, right? I'm not saying that every time this much of complexity is required, but once you understand that this is the level of complexity that can exist, you can very well plan out accordingly, right? Okay, if that is blank, what I will do is I'll do the summation of all these costs. I'll do the summation of all these costs divided by 98%. What is that? How did I get that 98%? 1 minus whatever are the financing costs. So this is how I have arrived at the 98%. And if it is not the construction period, I am leaving it as blank, which means my total project cost before IDC for each of the years is coming out to something like this, which I would go even up to the AZ in this way. Then I have my financing costs, which can very well be taken as total project cost before IDC. I multiply it by 1.5%, right? I multiply it by 1.5%, but yes, this is also applicable only for the construction period. If this equal to C, only then apply it, otherwise leave it as blank. So even my finance costs are coming out this way. This is not the total cost of the project. Please keep in mind, this is before the IDC only, before the interest during the construction. So if I don't consider the interest during the construction period, because my project has a loan, if I don't consider the interest during the construction period, this is what is the cost of my project. So next thing, before we move on to the operations phase, we would also try to compute the interest during the construction period also, and then take this forward. But just to showcase how robust this model will be, I just want to change, 3 years is the construction period. In the second year, I will make it 50, and the third year, I will make it 10%, just for understanding how much this model can accommodate. You are seeing here, for each of the years, it is giving us a different breakup altogether, saying the first 3 years are the construction. This should be the kind of dynamicness your system should take care of. You have to plan out from that standpoint altogether, right? So whatever we are thinking, the thought process should be lined up in such a way that even if the project gets delayed, or I'm handling a slightly lengthier project, all those things have to be taken care as a part of my model. That is the robustness I'm talking about. So the more and more you are able to visualize all the possibilities, though your formulas are going to be slightly more extensive or slightly more complicated, they build in a lot of robustness into our model, right? I mean, at the same time, it gives you a good hold on spreadsheet kind of a tool, which will definitely be helpful to you even at a later date when we are creating our own models, either for a standalone purpose or for integration with other systems or whatever may be the scenario. So the construction phase, probably I am going to deal with the interest during the construction, capitalizing the interest during the construction period separately, but without without considering the interest part, the project is already 110 or close to 111 crores project at this moment. The moment we bring in even the interest part, because if we see the first 2 years, these all are the costs that are incurred, right? And there is no revenue because we are still in the construction, we are not operating this project. So whatever, even if I say I'm having a capital of, let's say, 111 crores, right? This 111 crores is going for all these costs. Now, if I had taken a loan, whatever for whatever amount, let's say 60% of that, if I had taken a loan, the interest part, even if I say 111 crores, 60%, 66 crores, 10% interest, 6 crores I have to pay as an interest. Where is that amount coming for me? Where is that amount coming for me from? All those things, even for the interest during the construction, I may have to borrow. So that is what is the criticality of the interest during the construction period. So once I figure out what is the cost of interest during the construction period and I include it into the construction cost itself, that final number is what I call as the total construction cost of the project. That is where the construction period ends, and from there we get into the operations phase. So we'll take one more session primarily dealing with the interest during the construction period, and after that complete the total construction phase of the project. All right. Yeah. So up to here, I hope the clarity is much more. If you have any further queries regarding this, you can very well either get back to me over the phone or email. I can very well address your queries accordingly. Thanks a lot for listening to this session. Thank you very much.